Okay, welcome everybody to our 6-part masterclass series on how to transform your legal department into a more productive, better valued and more empowered IHL or in-house legal team. My name's Matt Glynn and I'll introduce myself more fully, but I just want to set the scene now. Over the next 6 sessions together, we're hoping to share with you our unique perspectives on how legal teams can affect what we call a new law transformation to adjust to a profoundly different in-house operating paradigm. We're calling this the New Law Transformation Series. Today, we're looking at covering 5 or 6 different areas. We're going to start by setting the scene and offering our views about the in-house community and offering a very unique perspective in terms of how the in-house community, what its place is in the legal industry. We're then going to explore the challenges, not only associated with the new in-house paradigm, but generally those external, internal, and even personal challenges related to the in-house role. Then we're going to turn to a framework in terms of how an in-house legal team can affect a transformation. We're going to explore what that journey actually entails. We're going to introduce to you what we call RPLV, which is our resourcing, prioritization, leverage, and validation framework that'll allow you to make transformation-related decisions in an efficient fashion. And because we're focusing on solutions that are implemented in the real world, we're actually going to preempt the kind of obstacles that you might expect in your transformation journey. And then as we come towards the end of this first session, we're going to explore the new law skill sets that we believe that the new modern in-house legal team is going to need in order to be effective. And then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts and actually also invite you to some Q&A. To the extent that you have any questions you might want to raise, feel free to introduce those questions by way of the instant messaging, and we'll respond to as many of those as we can at the end of the session. So let's get going. So whilst many of you are already working with the GLS group, we're absolutely thrilled that this series has been able to attract interest globally and well beyond our immediate client network. So we're going to kick off this session just with a very super short introduction to the GLS group for those of you who don't know us. The GLS group is the world's leading industry disruptor. No one's doing what we're doing, and certainly no one's doing it for the reasons that we actually do. Unusually, we believe that the role of the lawyer is absolutely critical to the world that we live in. And why so? Well, we've endured 11 years of the economic doldrums and little has changed. Just last week, news of Deutsche Bank shedding 18,000 jobs. It all sounds rather familiar for those of us that remember 2008. Yet, in that time, we've had fiscal stimulus, we've had quantitative easing, we've had trickle-down economics, and even in a few wars. But nothing's changed. The only way that we're going to get out of this global pickle, if you like, is if the business community gets busier. That means more deals, more trades, and that is where the lawyer, and most especially the in-house community, comes in. There can be absolutely no doubt that the in-house community is vitally important. In fact, more important than most realize. And that's the theme that sets the context for this entire series. So make absolutely no mistake. What we do, what the in-house community does, is vitally important, and we all have a role to play if we are to emerge to become an industry of business enablers. But to achieve this, the only sustainable future for the in-house lawyer, and lawyers generally, is to be able to achieve far more with far less. And that's why we set up the GLS group, is to help business do far more with far less. So the GLS group, we're a young company. We're only 5 years old. But in that short amount of time, we've grown to 450 people. We're in 21 countries. We've been nominated by the Financial Times for our work in innovation space. And interestingly, 5 years in, 75% of our global turnover now actually comes from helping the in-house community get more work done themselves. We do have a law firm, as it happens, But that's an interesting one. We only have a law firm inside the group because clients asked us for one. If they ever need it, we offer it, but we offer it at 20% of the cost of comparable providers. So our business is really all about enabling the in-house community to get more done itself. We absolutely know that the in-house community, along with the broader legal community, is going through profound change at the moment. In fact, there's much discussion around these changes, okay? Do they represent threats or do they represent opportunities? But this kind of clickbait headline sheds very little light on the root cause of overall industry change that we're experiencing. True industry-defining change is actually occurring within the in-house community, not the broader private practice community. It is the changes directly impacting the in-house community that we want to discuss today, along with our RPLV decision-making framework that's going to help your team respond to those changes. And as we do, we'd like to think that we're going to be able to show you that the opportunities associated with all the change is far outweighed by the threats that they pose. And most of you, or many of you, might be asking, what actually qualifies us to speak on this topic? Well, the answer is we've spent 5 years fixing things for the in-house community. We now offer over 100 productivity solutions to help the in-house community do more themselves. And we're an organization filled with former in-house lawyers, but uniquely working alongside technology experts, business process engineers, and other solvers and other problem solvers. So above all, I think what qualifies us is the insights that we've derived, key of which is a true understanding of what the in-house community is all about. And we want to start with that. And we think our unique perspective might actually surprise a good number of you. We think that the in-house community is, in terms of the broader legal community, a somewhat invisible community. Indeed, we think the in-house community is the dark matter of the legal universe. It has by and large been a silent, unseen, and yet only recently we've discovered its true nature. It's a powerful force exerting industry-defining control. And I think at this point, you guys are probably thinking, wow, what are these guys at GLS actually on? But do you doubt it? Let me make my case, if I may. The facts about the in-house community are as follows. By 2020, the SRA, which regulates the UK legal market, estimates that the overall legal profession will comprise 30 to 35% in-house lawyers. We estimate that more than 60% of private practice instructions come directly from in-house communities. And if you want to look at it another way, the in-house community is controlling approximately $1.5 trillion of the overall legal spend, which is a phenomenal number. And for the other 40%, well, we know that comes direct from business. And who knows business better than the in-house community? So we think that the private practice tends to dominate legal industry news and analysis. The in-house community attracts very little investment in terms of technologies that will enable it. Very few efficiency tools that have actually been developed specifically for the in-house community. Indeed, the largest in-house legal community forum, the ACC, has only 40,000 members. And we note that there are almost no professional programs or professional vocational programs specifically focused on the in-house community. So unfortunately, we think that it's an invisible community, notwithstanding the power that it so evidently yields. Our conclusion is that the in-house community is in fact a silent yet predominant force. So this is the audience for this masterclass, the in-house community. And our points as we set the scene here is that headlines can often be misleading. The in-house community is in fact ground zero for legal industry change. Whilst it may largely be unseen, its power, the power that you exert, is in fact driving the entire industry. And right now, the in-house community is currently facing a huge array of challenges. And the way that you respond is going to indelibly shape the legal industry for decades to come. And to make sense of all of those changes and to allow you to come up with an effective and sustainable response, in this session, we want to introduce our RPLV decision-making framework. So clearly, there's been a lot of changes, and we think that that has given life to what we're calling a new in-house paradigm. And what that paradigm looks like for the in-house community is as follows, okay? The in-house community has now been tasked by business to meet an exponentially growing legal and compliance requirement. After all, the world is more regulated these days, not less. But to meet that task, the in-house industry has fewer resources than ever before. Certainly, we don't know too many client organizations that have carte blanche in terms of the amount of people, resources, and tools that they can acquire. Everybody is operating a more fiscally astute model. And that results with the increasing number of external, internal challenges to far more pressure inside the in-house community. Right now, the typical in-house team would look a little bit like this, okay? The first thing that I want you to focus on is that the legal and support requirements are actually growing exponentially, and yet the resources available to meet that are being either reduced or remaining in a finite fashion. So what we've got is a growing gap between what you need to get done and the resources. The in-house teams typically operate on a reactionary footing. As you can see from the division of the pie chart there, there's less focus on strategic output, too much focus on what we call the grind zone. And it's also very inherently difficult to articulate the value of the in-house legal team. So we're also told by a huge number of our clients that the morale inside the in-house legal team is tending to, in many ways, mirror the private practice community. Lower levels of job satisfaction, more people leaving the profession. And of course, we have that sort of omnipresent existential threat that exists, which is if the in-house community does its job really well and a business experiences no problems, then the business turns to turn around and say, well, why do we need you anyway? So that's what the typical in-house legal team looks like. And let's now consider the kind of challenges which this team, configured as it currently is, has to deal with. The range of challenges are huge, and we've broken them down into three categories, two of which I want to focus on today. The externalities which are impacting on the legal team are obviously the overall economic climate. We've had 11 years of doom and gloom. Things are tough out there. At the same time, we've got increased regulation. People might talk about regulatory streamlining, but we have more complex business which tests regulations in different ways. There's just simply more regulation to get your head around. Increased competition. Everybody's going after limited resources. Of course, from an external point of view, you have that existential threat. Is AI and automation going to replace the lawyers? As a result, all in-house teams are operating in a lean mode. But internally, and this is where there's some significant challenges arise, right? You've got the challenge of finite resources, yet infinite need. You've got the inherent challenge between, does my lawyer participate in daily grind, or does it work more on the strategic assignments that I need the business to do, and the business needs us to support? Equally, our in-house community is operating in a very cynical internal ecosystem where the value recognition of the in-house lawyer, or lawyers generally, is pretty low. So there's increased pressure on the in-house community to demonstrate the value. And as things continue to remain tough and in fact get tougher, in-house teams are no longer immune from rationalization programs, okay? Previously, in-house teams were told how much they could spend, but not how. All of that's changing as rationalization and transformation programs look at every aspect of every business division's operations. But the net result is that there's a lot more pressure in the in-house community than ever before. So, how well equipped is the typical in-house team set up to deal with these challenges? We think that it's not an especially appropriate model in order to address those challenges. So what does a new in-house team need to look like? Well, we think it looks like this, okay? The in-house team of the future needs to be able to take that same pool of resources and achieve far greater productivity yields. In fact, it needs to reverse the polarity between the resources available and the need. In the old model, one was going north, the other was going south. Under the new model, the in-house team of the future has to make up that distance as opposed to allow it going to getting greater. But in terms of the tasks that the in-house team actually focuses on, the in-house team in the future has to make a far greater strategic contribution to the business, okay? It needs to become experts at leveraging all of the existing resources that it has, and as it does it, it needs to be able to precise in a very clear manner the value which it actually delivers to the business. In short, the in-house team of the future has to develop a high-performance culture, okay? It needs to not only compress external spend, but it has to improve the quality of advice that it gets from its external support. It has to also critically increase the role satisfaction associated for team members if they're going to grow and in fact transform and deliver on all of these challenges, okay, and performance requirements. And of course, I think like the private practice community as well, is that they need to answer the question and recognize that AI and technology generally isn't going to replace the in-house team, right? So how do we go from this old law legal team, if you like, to become the new law legal team in the face of all of these external, personal, and internal challenges? Well, the answer is RPLV. RPLV is our framework for decision making for in-house teams looking to undertake the transformation journey from the old law footing to the new law footing. We think that the in-house community needs a simple and effective and easy to implement strategy over which they're able to exert maximum control to guide their own journey from the old law footing to the new law footing. So let me now introduce to you RPLV decision-making framework. We're going to spend a little bit of time on all of the constituent parts of it, and just by way of a heads up that we're going to deep dive on some of the more core aspects of RPLV in future seminars. But let me give you a 30,000-foot introduction now. So RPLV decision-making is a tool that we've developed to help in-house teams that have infinite support requirements and yet limited resources. If you find yourself in a situation where you have infinite need but limited resources, you need to be making smart resourcing decisions. In its simplest form, RPLV is a reference framework to help you optimize the resourcing decisions that you make. Critically, though, what RPLV can do for you is place your resource decision making into a strategic transformation framework, which allows for some amazing things to emerge. Firstly, that journey will become self-authored. It will be non-disruptive because you can control the rate at which you implement it. It's incremental by nature. You take the steps that that are within your competencies and capacities of your organization. You can validate each step, and in so doing, raise the credentials needed to affect some of the more trickier aspects of transforming your legal team from an old one into a new one. RPLV is as powerful as it is simple. The constituent ingredients are resources. An in-house team needs to be truly cognizant of all of the available resources that it has at its disposal and come up with a unique plan for each category of resources to optimize them. In short, you need to be achieving far more bang for your buck because bucks are in short supply. Prioritization. Decisions made by reference to an approved domain of responsibility, okay, allow you to make a prioritized decision. If your team doesn't understand what its priority is, what its responsibilities are, then it's impossible to actually make prioritized resourcing decisions in the name of the established and approved priorities. Leverage. Active consideration of the individual legal resource leverage profile needs to become part of decision making, okay? Whilst it is not in and of itself 100% determinative, the new law team of the future is asking, when I make this decision as opposed to that decision, which one can I leverage to the greater effect of the greater benefit of the business? And then validation. Active consideration when it comes to resource allocation needs to be given to your ability to validate or benefit or performance outcomes associated with that decision. It's unavoidable these days. There's an element of politic, and to show that you're doing a good job, whilst it shouldn't all be about political-based decisions, it's an important part. So what we're going to do for the next 10 or 15 minutes is just to quickly explore a little bit more of an unpack around these 4 powerful principles. But as I say, as I flagged up before, we are in later seminars in this series actually going to do a little bit more of a deep dive around these principles, and critically to show you how these principles can be applied in your workplace to achieve pretty significant productivity gains. Okay, so let's start with resources, okay? Resources, what we want you to do when it comes to applying this principle is to consider the full spectrum of resources that are available to your in-house team. The traditional thinking is to take a somewhat binary view of resourcing. It's either headcount on budget or both, okay? That's not the way the new law team operates. The new law team looks well beyond just headcount and budget and starts thinking about things in terms of outputs versus inputs, and making sure that the output, whatever class of legal resource, massively outweighs the input. We want you to identify the full spectrum of legal resources, and then in relation to what you actually have, that which is already on the P&L, that which you can actually reach out, touch, manipulate, implement each day, we want you to come up with a specific strategy on how you optimize each class. And more than that, think about how it is that you can actually combine classes of resources. A very simple example. What happens if you give a lawyer a productivity tool such as a playbook? The performance of the lawyer enhances, but the combinations that can be achieved by combining resources and the associated leveraged output is significant. But we want you to think about it. What we know from our 5 years of work is that there is abundant latent capacity inside almost every single business, every single in-house team that we've ever visited and worked with, okay? Whilst people think they're busy because they clock 10 hours each day, it doesn't mean that all of the available classes of legal resources have been used to drive maximum productivity. So the first finding here is really significant. We're saying to you, without any cost implication, by applying RPLV thinking, particularly identifying the resources that are truly available and genuinely available to you, you can achieve a significant productivity gain without any cost at all. The R in RPLV is really important to get right, because ultimately it's going to drive your ability to leverage, and that's the L we'll come on to later. So without having put down what all of the specific classes of legal resources that are typically available, and there are more than 20 of them, the kind of things that you should expect to be looking for is your people, tools available to your people. It might be templates. It could be as intangible as morale. There's nothing more contagious than negativity, right? Morale is something that can be used to be manipulated to achieve great productivity results. Your environment's critical, workflows, systems, experience, all of these constitute unique forms of legal resources. Prioritization. Prioritization is really the art of compromise for many in-house legal teams, okay? We have not met, whether you're Fortune 100, Fortune top 10, or a small fintech startup, we have not met any single team that has infinite resources Almost no in-house team has an unlimited budget and an unlimited pool of resources to meet the requirements the business asks them to meet. In terms of priority setting theory, there are a number of key points that we want you to focus on. Firstly, priority setting theory is about how do you make the absolute best use of the limited resources you've got. Part of that process is about having a clear understanding of what matters to your business. It's about understanding what is going to move the needle. It's about understanding value. How can you demonstrate recurring value to your business? And ultimately, it's about sustainability. There's no point spending all of your resources on a particular project or initiative if it means you've got nothing left for the initiatives that actually keep the wheels in your business spinning. Now, the context for prioritization is really important. And for us, this is a not negotiable, okay? For an in-house legal team to be able to prioritize, it needs to have a very clear understanding of its mandate within the business. It needs to agree with the business what are the priorities that that team is to address. Without a very clear sense of those priorities, it's impossible for resources to be allocated and tasked in a prioritized manner. Now, for those of you that might be thinking, gosh, we don't have a clearly articulated business endorsed, board endorsed legal policy, you fall into the 90% of the in-house legal teams out there. Pretty much only 10% of in-house teams actually have a group legal policy that would allow for the optimization of a prioritization setting strategy. Leverage. Okay, so we understand what's available to us. We understand the priorities that the business has asked us to meet. How, when we allocate resources within our in-house legal team, can we explore the leverage potential? So the leverage component is as follows. As a strategy, the new law legal team is going to leverage absolutely everything you have. The decision making must be a default, almost Pavlovian response. How can I leverage it? What is its leverage profile? And whilst, again, not 100% determinative, right? The fact that the tasking of one resource in one way as opposed to another offers greater leverage resonance, it's going to start influencing the decisions of a new law in-house legal team, okay? The objective, of course, is to seek the maximum productivity resonance that the allocation of that resource will bring to your organization. But keeping it high level, when you allocate the finite resources that you've got in a prioritized fashion, making sure that you can count as much as possible to impact as far into your organization as you can becomes a strategic aspect of decision making. So whether it's time, whether it's your effort, people, tools, experience, advice, each and every category of resource, the new in-house legal team is going to be asking themselves, how can I leverage it to the greatest effect? So then we come to the slightly more challenging aspect. And I say challenging because the legal profession generally has been somewhat of an intangible discipline. If we get it right, there are no problems. People question what it is that we actually do. And generally, the business community doesn't have a strong appreciation for the value that we bring. Okay, no problem. Get it, understood. It's a challenge that we now need to meet. As part of RPLV decision making, the new in-house legal team needs to give thought to how it can actually validate, right, the benefits, the wisdom, what can be achieved from its resourcing decisions. And the ability to validate going forward is going to have significant implications. It's going to help you justify your annual budgets. It's going to help you in terms of how you exert influence over the decisions that the business make. It's a key concept. We believe that the legal community in terms of the in-house audience has likewise welcomed itself to the empirical data era. The ability to validate, as I said, is a counterbalance to the intangible nature of what we actually do, right? Teams now must demonstrate actual productivity, okay? There needs to be a focusing on the recurring value scenarios, and the ability to track the value that you bring is going to allow you to influence decisions going forward. Critically, the ability to show the return on an investment, the enhanced productivity that you achieve from your resourcing allocations is going to become the foundation stones for the more challenging aspects of transformation. Certainly, when it comes to raising budget for things that you might like to do further on, such as embracing AI-based technologies or acquiring new skills or whatever it is, the ability to show that you are adding value to the business in a tangible and objective fashion is going to be key. So the advantages of RPLV, and this is where we're going to focus on why we think it's such a potent framework for decision making. Okay, the advantages of RPLV are as follows. Firstly, it's inexpensive. It's a way of thinking about how you make decisions. Okay, sometimes the barn which is on fire just needs to be put out, and you need to call the fire brigade, and it costs what it costs. No problem. That's not what we're talking about here. But the ability to make a little bit of space in your decision making to consider RPLV is going to allow you to make incremental changes. Okay, you could implement that which makes sense at the time and with the time that you've actually got. Critically, RPLV is not about buying a report from McKinsey and then trying to implement it. RPLV is about real change. The kind of change, the best kind of change, the kind of changes that you make yourself. And critically, that flows naturally because you are the author of your own transformation. And of course, if you are able to validate and demonstrate the recurring nature of the productivity gains that you bring to your business, and we're going to have a great session in terms of, I think it's session 3, in terms of the kind of empirical data metrics that you can use to measure the performance, right? You will be able to bring your organization along, and we call that the Pied Piper effect. So RPLV, okay, it's not something that we're selling. It's just simply a decision-making framework that costs you nothing. You can implement it at your own pace, but it will allow you to bring self-authored real change that will bring the organization with you. Right. Like any initiative that you try to implement into almost any circumstance, there are going to be obstacles, okay? And there are 7 particular obstacles that come up time and time again, whether it's a transformation project, whether it's choosing the color of the carpet in your new office, okay? All of these kind of challenges are associated with anything that's new. Transformation obstacles. Like any new initiative you implement into any system, any ecosystem, there's always going to be obstacles when you try and do something new. There are 7 that we specifically want to talk about because they're kind of ubiquitous obstacles that you always find on any new project. It's time, goals, focus, overcomplication, skills, budget, and also change management. What we want to do is just very briefly, so that you can actually embrace RPLV and see how easy it is to use, is to show you the complementary nature of RPLV in terms of how you can actually address each of these challenges. Time. Well, yes, absolutely. Some time is going to be required in order to implement RPLV, particularly if you're in that 90% that actually hasn't documented and agreed an official mandate in terms of priorities and focus for your legal team. But the time involved in that is not exorbitant. You can do it at your own pace, right? or you can do it as part of the RPLV journey itself. Goals. One of the biggest obstacles to implementing RPLV, and we see this particularly the bigger the company, the more they want to do, is setting unrealistic goals. RPLV will work. 100% it will work, provided you focus on small incremental changes that you can implement yourself. Small incremental changes based on a pass and proceed methodology is in fact the fastest way to achieve your in-house team transformation. In-house team transformation is not about a big bang. It's about small, proven steps taken frequently. Focus. Absolutely, you will need to have the discipline to apply RPLV. You will need to make it habitual. However, because of its micro nature, as I say, if the barn's burning, you don't need to think about it. Ideally, you would, but you don't need to. The focus is just about making a little bit of space in your decision making when it comes to allocating finite resources and applying the RPLV methodology. Change management. It doesn't matter what you're doing. There's always going to be people that are uncomfortable with change. It's the nature of humanity. But by taking those smaller incremental steps, which are self-authored, which you can demonstrate, work to the business, the ability to mitigate the change management obstacle is inherently greater. Skills, absolutely. We're going to round out this first presentation in terms of looking at the new kind of skills that the future in-house legal team needs to have. And in fact, we're going to have a lot more discussion about that in future sessions. But there are going to be new skills that's required. The ability to validate findings, okay? You might need to learn how to use, certain analytical tools, if only Excel. So new skills are going to be required. And then budgetary. With any project, it needs to be funded. But the brilliant thing about RPLV is that RPLV authored transformation doesn't have to cost lots of money. In fact, it doesn't have to cost anything. You can do it all yourself. We've already spoken about identifying the full spectrum of legal resources that you have, and that almost in every organization, those resources remain inherently underutilized. So the ability to apply RPLV and bring on about new and greater productivity results without any budget is well and truly within reach when it comes to the RPLV methodology. So skills, as promised, what are the new skills? Yep, they're definitely different. Let's take a look and see what they are. We think that the new law in-house team, starting from the bottom, obviously you need to continue to be a lawyer. And to be a lawyer, you have to be technically great, and particularly if you're an in-house lawyer, you have to have the ability to influence a deal, influence colleague. You need to be a strong communicator, and of course, you've got to be a team worker. Overlay on top of that, specific traditional in-house skills. You need to be an expert in terms of your company, how it works. You need to be an expert in terms of your industry. And you also need to be an expert in terms of the kind of deals your company is involved with. But when it comes to the new law in-house legal team, there are definitely a whole array of new skills that you need to acquire, okay? Efficiency at all times and in all things becomes a very key concept. You're going to become process engineers, okay? You're going to become analysts. You're going to become value farmers. Yes, I've just used this firm to give me a data transfer agreement. Well, don't go back and ask for 10 different times for 10 different parts of the business. Look at how you can farm the value of what you've received for the benefit of the business. Potency. You've got to become a business enabler, provide more strategic advice to get things done. You've got to focus on efficiency. You've got to become innovators, different ways of doing things. You're going to become salespeople to get your message across, to justify the decisions in the direction that you wish to take your team and ultimately the business. Technologists, you're going to become familiar with a whole array of technology, and we're going to come to that in, I think it's Seminar 5 or Seminar 6, to help you make sense of this seemingly unlimited number of new technologies available, although most are focused on the private practice community. time managers, disruptors, prioritizers, validators. You get the message here. There is a whole host of new law skills that you're going to have to require in order to apply RPLV and to become a new law team of the future. So I think we're keeping neatly to time, and we can now sort of wrap up this first very introductory, scene setting, wet the whistle introduction into RPLV and the challenges which the in-house team face. The conclusions that we hope you take away from session 1 are as follows. The in-house team is facing a new operational paradigm. Business as usual is now about delivering far more with far less. And the business community has asked you to do that whilst at the same time trying to make sense of and respond to a huge array of challenges, some of which are external, but many of which are internal. Your response, the in-house legal team's response, by virtue of the true, unseen, and hitherto unrecognized power that you yield, is in fact going to shape the entire legal industry going forward. Change that you hear, the headlines that you read, is not about what's happening at law firms, although they tend to dominate the headlines. Industry-defining change is occurring at the in-house community level, and RPLV is our suggested framework that allows you to make sense of those challenges, which affords you a strategic context to apply to your decision-making as you task increasingly finite resources to support the infinite needs of your business. Categorically, assuredly, RPLV will help you drive yourself to a more optimally efficient transformation of your team, which is critical because in the face of all of the challenges that you now encounter, standing still and doing nothing is simply not an option. And on that note, I really want to offer a very sincere congratulations and thank you and well done to you guys, because the legal industry is inherently the most risk-averse industry. We don't like change, whether it's vocational training or genetic predisposition. Lawyers generally are the last ones to react. But by joining us today and learning about RPLV, you are most certainly not in that majority. You are breaking the mold of apathy, which afflicts so much about you. You are actively formulating a response. You are saying, I want to understand what all this means. I want to leverage from the experience of others. I want to react ahead of time. We believe, we know that if you just incorporate RPLV-based thinking into your decision-making, you will see an exponential productivity yield in no time whatsoever. And in future sessions, particularly when we look at the empirical data measures which you can start tracking, you're going to be able to demonstrate the potency of your steps. So, any questions?
In fact, the team's been aggregating the questions that have come through on the chat, and it looks like we have quite a lot of micro questions, but also a good number of requests for examples of a real-life application of RPLV thinking. So I think just in view of the fact that we've got sort of 10 minutes to go, we might just focus on that one. Nothing like applying the principles we just learnt about. But I think it's important too that for us to follow up for all the questions that we have received. Maybe we'll just aggregate them and provide a written follow-up, and if everybody's okay with it, we'll just provide a single mail shot so that we can consolidate and cross-fertilize all the different lines of inquiries. And and see how old RPLV stacks up. So, all right, let's talk about two examples of RPLV application. The first would be ourselves. We run, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we run a law firm, and we've applied RPLV thinking to the operations of that law firm and the focus of that law firm, and we've been able to operate at, and on a consistent basis, at 20% of the cost of comparable providers. So in terms of outputs, in terms of what RPLV can deliver, that's a pretty difficult data point to actually ignore. But the theme for today is about the application of RPLV and its ability to empower the in-house legal team. And for that, I think there's probably one consistent example or request that we get, which really resoundingly illustrates just what RPLV can deliver. So we've worked with a pretty significant number of world-leading MNCs and a huge array of mid-cap companies on a consistent theme of overhauling contracting infrastructure. And that project typically looks like a request for services to update legal templates. These companies have all had a consistent goal of trying to move the needle in terms of becoming more efficient at supporting the business. And consistently, they've thought that the best way to achieve that was actually through the template, by focusing their efforts on the template. And as you'd expect, the usual story. Everybody wanted a fixed price to upgrade anywhere from 15 templates, which I think is the smallest one that we've done, through to as many as 270, which clearly we didn't do because it wasn't needed. So in each case, we've come along and we've introduced RPLV thinking to them. And the immediate impact has been to get all of these different organizations to pump the brakes in terms of the project and get away from just thinking about templates, but rather thinking about their underlying inefficiencies that they're trying to address and also leveraging available efficiencies. And the application of RPLV was basically as follows. We convinced them not to think so much about templates, but rather, with the time and the budget that they had at hand, what was the maximum productivity yield they could achieve? What actually came before templates, in fact, way before that. So we got them to focus on the need for a clear policy on behalf of their respective organizations, which actually set out the parameters which regulated the basis upon which they were prepared to do business with their third parties, with any third party. And with that document settled, and it's a challenging exercise to get everybody singing from the same hymn sheet, but it's absolutely possible with the right methodology. But once they'd achieved that position, we then got them to focus on producing a standard clause bank. And that clause bank comprised the essential legal terms and conditions that made up 75% of any template they'd ever lead. Not just the ones that they'd asked us to focus on, but just literally any agreement where there was a case for them to produce the templates. That clause bank would then feed into any precedent they had going forward. Once we had them thinking about the clause bank, we then got them to sort of move on to the production of a single precedent, just a small next incremental step. The service agreement. Why? Well, very simply, because it's a commonly used high utility template, which if done correctly can release a lot of efficiencies into the ecosystem. And whether it's the basis upon which you generate revenue through the provision of services, or you bring stability to your supply chain, it's a really important document. So that was the next step, was to actually produce that single template. From there, we got them to actually think, well, now that you've got your policy right, you've got clause bank right, you've got a template, why don't we enable all of the potential users inside your ecosystem of a template? Now that would be the legal team, that would be the procurement team, it would be the commercial team, it could be contract administrators. But if we actually then gave them the tools to negotiate the same set of vital legal and commercial provisions that are now going to appear inside every one of their neatly standardized template, then the exponential effect in terms of empowering the organization to do better business was evident. So we got the policy in place. We got them thinking about the clause bank, which reflected that policy, to bake the policy in at the DNA level. We then got them to produce a key template in the form of the services agreement. But what they then left them was a situation where any additional template they might need could be produced in around 3 to 4 man-hours of effort. And that's pretty powerful. It's no longer, external provider do this job for us. It's, well, we could now start doing things ourselves. And the efficiencies were driven by two drivers. Firstly, the remaining 25% of an agreement, which actually gives us a distinct character, is a much more manageable task than trying to come up with all the clauses. Secondly, you've got a pool of pre-baked compliant clauses which you can just use on a sort of plug and play basis. So the results that we're achieving at this point are, number one, an aligned contracting position, in most cases the first time the organisation's ever achieved that. Secondly, a centralised clause bank, which is 75% of any agreement and super easy to maintain, make an update and propagate it through all your templates, really, great efficiencies in terms of maintenance. Third, we've got an approved high volume contract for immediate deployment. It's going to move the needle straight away because it is important. It does help revenue generation. It does bring stability to supply chain. Fourth, we've got some additional tools in terms of a playbook, which is again produced in line with group policy that empowers all the frontline staff. Fifth, a methodology to produce any number of additional templates that are required in a matter of hours. So the real raison d'etre in terms of the application of RPLV was delivering a series of comprehensive tools that sort of worked in sync with each other and empowered the overall ecosystem, and again in most cases for the first time. So when we think about it, the R was really significant. The R was not thinking about just templates, but what are the associated resources in that category that were fundamental to the problem? And in this case, it was by focusing on the policy, and then also the templates, but also the playbooks and the clause banks, that you got a much greater leverage opportunity, okay? And I should add that in pretty much every single case where we've actually deployed RPLV for contracting infrastructure, those clients have actually gone on to also produce a third-party contracting checklist, which is really very important because not every deal you do is on your own paper. But the production of the checklist was just an obvious and natural next step because it just needed to be reversed out from an already finalised group level policy. So the P part, well, that's again, in this particular case, pretty obvious, right? Efficient dealings with third parties is core to any business. It could be the basis upon which you generate revenue, okay? And it is going to be fundamental to bringing supply chain and vendor management stability. So it's an obvious area which is high priority. But then the leverage profile, well, instead of just focusing on the template, if we shifted the focus a couple of steps before to the policy, then the ripple effect available from leveraging that resourcing decision was infinitely greater than just picking up the phone, briefing in some law firms to update templates, which then became out of date the moment they were handed over. It allowed the policy to be leveraged and flowed into the clause bank, and the templates itself, the negotiation training tools, which really empower the frontline users, and of course the checklist, which just rounded things off nicely in the case of third-party paper. And then of course the V part of RPLV. The validation in this case was, as it is in every case, is what we've been advocating, is really, really critical. In each case, we asked the client to monitor a bare minimum of 3 empirical data performance metrics. And the 3 were as follows. It was start monitoring the average time it takes to close a particular species of contract. Okay, so in this case, let's focus on services agreements. Then the second thing is start recording the time that, from the time which the business asks you to generate a contract for a particular deal, your turnaround time to the point when the actual document is put into the field of play. And then finally, to round out the essential 3, start actually monitoring the number of deals that you manage to sign per month or per quarter. And over a series of a couple of quarters, the results actually proved to be really drastic, to say the least. The best result that we'd seen for a very, very large MNC in the energy space was a reduction of 60% across the entire Asia-Pac region, which is quite an astonishing result. So that, I think, is a really powerful example of RPLV application. And the beauty of it is that it speaks to everything that we've said in this seminar. Firstly, find some space in your day just to apply RPLV, okay? Just create a little bit of room to ask yourself, you know, am I looking at the right category of resources? Do I have a strategy to optimize those? Is the resourcing allocation prioritized in the broader scheme of things in terms of what the business has asked me to do and what the business finds important? And then how do you leverage that? You know, are you focusing on the right resource category, and does it offer the highest leverage profile? And then track the results, okay? In each case, the very, very, you know, non-invasive implementation in terms of, you know, coming up with a new way of optimizing contracting implementation, contracting infrastructure, it allowed you to go back to the business and say, well, look, you know, this is the results, which actually paves the way for more, you know, interesting and, you know, maybe, you know, deeper in ecosystem penetration type transformation events. So I think just looking at the clock, yeah, it looks like we're coming up pretty close to the hour, if not just a minute or so past, and time to close out this session.
Right. So what's next? Well, what's next is obviously Seminar 2. In Seminar 2, we're going to look at the full legal resource spectrum and give you the tools so that you can identify what they are and to determine whether or not those resources are available in your ecosystem. The key message is you can't leverage, you can't prioritize what you don't recognize. So we're also going to spend some time in Seminar 2 looking at different strategies to leverage common resource types. Finally, just a reminder that this particular presentation is going to be available for you to download to the extent that you might want to share it with colleagues or otherwise listen to it at a slightly more relaxed pace. Finally, thanks very much for joining us. Thank you very, very much indeed. We're on a mission at GLS to help the in-house community to achieve far more with far less. It's entirely possible. What we advocate and what we're doing are clearly different from anything else out there in the industry. And I think that in and of itself explains why we've gone from just 2 founders to 450 odd people in such a short time. We've got an incredible amount of work to do. There are so many things that need to be fixed. There are so many ways of fixing them. And we ourselves are now going to get back to our desk and apply RPLV because that is what our business runs on. Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you all again at Seminar 2.